And
all right, you're being recorded, Rick, so watch what you say.
Okay.
Just kidding. All right, I'm going to step out and go print some of those for everybody.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with those, and then maybe if we get through those, I might give you a couple more.
Oh, okay, great. All right, just teasing. All right, I'll be back. And if y'all hear somebody beep, beep, beep in, then that means they need to be admitted. If you can do that for me while I run and do that, thanks.
So how's everybody doing?
Good. Good. Y'all gonna have to talk up for me here.
I could hear that one. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and we'll get started with these. Or do you want to wait till you get them in hand?
I don't know.
Or you want me to go ahead and start? Do you have any just basic contract questions or anything?
I would say go ahead and start. No questions.
Okay. Let me also try and pull. Let's see if I can. So I'll go ahead and let's see here. Let's see if I can get this thing working. So share screen. This is what I want to. Can you all see the as-is addendum?
Yep.
Okie doke. So with these, I am not going to read through the top part. Y'all hopefully can figure out how to fill in the top part there to the contract. So I am going to just go with the meat of it here. So
Rick, the only thing you might want to mention there is, you know, that date up there is not the date you're doing this. It's the date of the original purchase.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, make sure to read this top part. So this is an addendum to the purchase agreement dated. So you would do it, that contract, let's say it was dated, you know, July 20th. You put in the date of when that was dated for July 20th, 2021, not today's date. So thank you, Juanita, for pointing that out. So you do need to read this part up here, because sometimes they might even have some that will say this addendum dated such and such. So that would be today's date is an addendum to the purchase agreement dated. So then you put in the contract date. So you'll need to put both of them in. But anyway, just read those parts there. So this is a fairly short addendum. It's the one page. So but in today's market, we are seeing the as-is addendum being used more in a competitive market. Although, is it slowing down a little bit? Is it less hectic right now with down there? It is in Northern Virginia. What are you all seeing? Not.
It's slowing down a little bit, I think.
Yeah. It's still a seller's market, but it is not the multiple offers, you know, 20 offers coming in the first day is what I'm hearing kind of around the state and the whole area. I mean, even, I shouldn't just say around the state, around the country. So
what do you think is the reason for that, Rick?
I hate to say I hadn't thought about it all that much, but I do think, I think some of the buyers have settled down and have settled down a little bit as far as, or getting a little, I hate to say, concerned with, they don't want to get caught up in the craziness. I do think they are a little worried about how prices and everything are going up, not just in housing, but in everything right now. There is inflation going on. You know, the interest rates are still pretty good. So I don't think it's interest rate stopping anything. I would say, you know, just when you listen to didn't the surveys were showing that people are not very optimistic right now. The optimism, whatever is lowest in, I can't remember, years and years and years, if not the history, you know, since they've been taking that survey. So that's not a, you know, not a great one. So, but anyway, we are still lucky. It's still a seller's market, still a good market. In fact, I prefer the market we're in right now to what we had back in, March and April and all that craziness. And probably most agents would prefer the market we're in right now because, people are not getting as mad. I mean, it was chaotic for everybody, for the sellers, for the listing agents, for the buyer agents, and for the buyers. So anyway.
Yeah, it does appear to be settling down some. I just got a contract on a listing that was overpriced. So we came in under, and we also got more in closing than we even asked for.
Yeah, awesome. That market we were in was it was nuts. It really was. And, unfortunately, we're dealing with it a little bit through threats of court cases and things like that by buyers. You didn't tell me about this. They were told. They just, don't want to own up to their own decisions of, they decided to waive a home inspection and they decided on their own to waive the appraisal and say they would pay anything above, what it appraised for. And then, all of a sudden it was 30,000 or 50. We had one that was in Northern Virginia that was over 100,000 under appraisal. And, then they're, oh my goodness, we can't do this. Well, you agreed to. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started here with the property inspection. So paragraph 1, property inspection for as-is transaction. The purchase agreement is contingent upon purchaser being satisfied with the results of an inspection of the property. Seller grants purchaser 10 days from the date of ratification, defined in paragraph 27 of the purchase agreement, to conduct such inspection of the property as purchaser deems necessary, including but not limited to whole house inspection, well water, septic, radon, lead-based paint, termite inspection. Seller shall have all utilities supplied to all systems prior to the inspection. If seller fails to have all utilities supplied to all systems prior to purchaser's inspection, then the expiration of the inspection period shall be extended until 10 days following the date that purchaser is notified by seller that all utilities have been supplied to all systems. If purchaser is not satisfied with the results of purchaser's inspections, purchaser may terminate the purchase agreement by written notice to seller within the inspection period. In such event, the subject to paragraph 8 of the purchase agreement, purchaser's deposit shall be refunded to purchaser and the parties shall have no further obligation under the purchase agreement. If purchaser does not terminate the purchase agreement within the inspection period, then this contingency shall be deemed waived. So the basics of it, you've got 10 days to do any and all inspections that your purchaser wants to do. If they want to move forward, they don't have to do anything because at the end of the 10 days, that contingency just goes away and everybody keeps moving forward. If the buyer wants to get out because for any reason of the inspections, they just need to send notice that they are voiding the contract. Unlike doing the home inspection contingency, in paragraph 16, they don't need to provide a copy of the inspection or anything like that. They just send notice voiding the contract if you're using the as-is addendum. Any questions on that?
So I don't know if you said this or not. So if they are waiving the inspection, then this as-is addendum is necessary or no?
They're kind of two different things.
Okay.
If the property is being sold as is, remember, it's not just the home inspection that is, if you would, is as is. It's the seller's not going to provide a termite inspection. The seller, if it's on septic, the seller's not going to provide a septic inspection. You have 10 days to do all those different, inspections that you want to do and figure out whether you're going to take the property in the condition that it's in.
Okay. That clears it up. Yeah, thank you.
Now, another thing, what this thing says, so let me read paragraph 2 and then I'll cover what I was just going to say, because it pretty much covers it. So paragraph 2, property sold as is. The parties acknowledge that the property is sold in as is condition as determined as of the date of the purchase agreement. And purchaser agrees to accept property at settlement in such condition. So that first line is saying you're accepting it in the condition that it's in the date of the purchase contract. So when that contract is written. So you need to tell the seller, you need to understand that if the condition changes, then you need to bring it back to the condition that it was when the contract was written. So there is and the nice part about it is, if your seller, if your buyer is doing a home inspection and everything in those first 10 days, that's kind of the litmus test, if you would, for the condition that it's in. And then at the pre-settlement walkthrough, if things have changed, let's say the home inspector looks at it and the HVAC system is working fine. And then when you go for the pre-settlement walkthrough and the HVAC system is now not working, the seller would be responsible for fixing that. Does that make sense? So we'll keep reading. Excluding warranty of title, seller makes no representation or warranty express or implied as to the condition of the property or any system, equipment, or appliance therein. All clauses regarding any repairs to the property by seller or any representatives or warranties relating to the physical condition of the property by seller, including without limitation, paragraph 16, 24E, F, and G, are hereby deleted from the purchase agreement and are of no legal effect. Purchaser hereby acknowledges that seller will not provide a well water test, septic inspection, or termite report, and seller has no obligation to make repairs to the property or any system, equipment, or appliance therein, except to conform the property to the condition as of the date of the purchase agreement. Seller grants to purchaser the right to make a pre-settlement inspection to verify that the condition of the property conforms to provisions of this paragraph. If at or prior to settlement, seller refuses to conform the property to the condition as of the date of the purchase agreement, including the repair of any damage to the property occurring after the date of the purchase agreement, then purchaser may terminate the purchase agreement by written notice to seller and receive a refund of the deposit or waive the property condition and proceed to settlement with no reduction in the purchase price. If the purchase agreement is terminated and subject to paragraph 8 of the purchase agreement, the deposit shall be refunded to the purchaser and neither party shall have any further obligation thereunder. Paragraph 3, except as modified by this addendum, all other terms and conditions of the purchase agreement are hereby ratified and reaffirmed. So any questions on this? Okie doke. So let me.
Rick, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I've seen sometimes with the current market and in the past when a selling agent says property's being sold as is, no repairs will be made, attach the addendum. And then I see that these get submitted and then they counter with redlining through number 1. In other words, you can do the inspection, but you can't walk away if there's anything alarming. And so they're basically saying you take it with that, with all the risks. Any input on that part?
Well, the one thing, one, you need to definitely tell your sellers that, your buyers, that they are really at risk of things. Right. Me, that seems like the seller might be trying to hide something. Right. So
just be aware, everybody, in this market, as tight as it is, it's too big a risk.
It really is. And if you've got a buyer who says they're going to move forward and want to do that, please get it in writing that you have advised them that they are at high risk in doing so, and get that in writing and keep it.
Yep.
Because unfortunately, the American way is to turn around and blame others for, you know, your own poor decisions. The one thing about it, that does not change. The hard part there is it doesn't take away the fact that the property is still supposed to be in the condition that it was as of ratification. So if nothing else, that buyer needs to go through that property and take photos and everything of the condition that the property is in. Or even get a home inspection, you know, somebody, a third party, to come through and tell them what condition it's in right up front. So that if that changes, then paragraph 2 still kicks in, and that seller is obligated to bring it back to that condition. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and Patrice, thanks for asking that question for clarification, because it has been kind of confusing what as is really means.
Right.
You know? So
yeah.
Your question definitely helped to clarify it. It almost makes it seem like it ties, number 1 ties back into the part on the original purchase agreement about opting out if you have the inspection, you know, the opt-out inspection thing.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Here on in paragraph 16 is what you're talking about, right there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, whereas if you don't, what does it say? If something about if you don't want to do the inspection, or if you get an inspection and you can just.
Yeah, you can, if you opt in, if you pick this one, then, and you do an inspection, you can
walk.
Just walk. Yeah. Yes. But it also does say that if you ask for repairs to be done, then you don't get to go have the option of just walking anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So
they're kind of confusing. So
yeah, let me try and pull the next one that I was going to go over. Talking about that. So Form 130. Actually, let me just close that and I'll. Oh, shoot, I already had it. But anyway. So, talking about paragraph 16, if you are going to, you do your home inspection. Again, fill out this top part, and then you need to choose one or the other. So it says here, select one. So purchaser waives the right to request any repairs to the property, or purchaser hereby requests and seller agrees at seller's expense to make the following repairs of defects revealed during the property inspection. The term defect, it really goes through it again. This is what in paragraph 16, talking about what a defect really is. The term defect means a condition which impairs the normal stability, safety, or use of any improvements on the property, or damage to any part of the improvements, but shall exclude any cosmetic flaws, antiquated systems, or grandfathered components that are in working order but would not comply with current building code if constructed or installed today. If a system or component is near, at, or beyond its projected life expectancy, but is properly functioning, then such system or component will not be deemed a defect as defined herein. All repairs performed by seller or seller's contractors shall be completed prior to settlement and in accordance with the provisions of paragraph 16 of the agreement, unless otherwise agreed in writing by the parties. Pursuant to paragraph 16 of the agreement, purchaser shall not request seller to perform any inspections of the property, except as listed below. Purchaser waives their right to request any further repairs of the property pursuant to paragraph 16 of the agreement. List below all repairs of defects requested by purchaser and cost of repairs pursuant to the inspection report provided to seller. So again, it tells you what things you can't ask for. So again, if that HVAC system is 30 years old, but it still works, you don't get to ask to have that repaired or replaced. The same with, a lot of home inspectors love to say, oh, this is a 1950s house and the kitchen is the original kitchen and there's no GFCI plugs or whatever. And they'll say, well, that's not up to code. Well, it was to code when it was built. So you don't get to ask for those to be updated or anything. So below that here.
Rick,
yes.
Just to that point, because this comes up quite often, typically we as agents need to do what our clients ask us to do.
Right.
But in a situation like this, where we know something is not a defect, according to the definition, but the client wants it done anyway and wants you to ask for it.
Right. Then you've got to do what your client asks.
Okay.
Yeah,
because that seems to be contradictory.
Yeah. But what, explain to them that seller probably is just going to strike through that because it's not allowed per the contract that they agreed to. And, what I would do, the best thing, if you can, is discuss these items before they're writing the contract.
Yeah, but they forget.
And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you want to have things fixed that are, not called defects, then let's go ahead and determine that right up front to see, if the seller is even going to entertain that. So let's strike that language out of the paragraph 16 when you're making the offer. And so, there's no sense in getting into a contract, paying a home inspector to go out there and do it, and then turn around and try and ask for these things when the seller is probably just going to say no.
So what do you mean by striking it out in the original contract?
Yeah. So, whoops, get out of the way there thing. So, in here where it talks about what a defect is, somewhere in here, this part right here, you would strike through all that part right up front so that you are then allowed to ask for anything. You would strike through it and put, your buyers would initial it. And then if the seller agrees, the seller would initial it. Well, now you're open to be able to ask for all that stuff.
Okay.
But then you have to let them know that your contract might not be accepted.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, yeah, because it seems to be harder and harder convincing clients that those things are just not making any sense to ask for. I mean, a laundry list.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think I've told this before when I was selling, and this was a long time ago. This was 25 at least years ago. I had somebody wanted to blow the deal up and it was an old house, and in the tub, remember the old stoppers that were on a chain?
Yeah.
Well, that stopper it was dry rotted a little bit, had a crack in it. And these people weren't going to go to settlement and everything because the stopper had a crack in it. And I got mad. I took $2 out of my wallet and smacked it on the table in front of him. I said, there's a $2, go buy yourself another stopper. Now sign the blah, blah, blah settlement papers. And, but, and they did.
Yeah, I got
that wasn't my best moment, but anyway, I was like, this is ridiculous. Over a $2 stopper, they're going to walk away from a settlement. So anyway.
So Rick, how do you, in doing what your client wants you to do versus the selling agent thinking that you're crazy for even asking about some of those things?
I would just put it in there. This is per my buyer's request.
Okay, gotcha.
And we have to do what the buyer asks, even, so.
Okay.
Yep.
I understand. I just want to make sure that.
Oh yeah. So.
You don't want to get a reputation of being difficult to deal with and not.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So number 2, and again, you have to pick one of these. Now, if you are picking in option 1, if you're picking that purchaser waives the right to request any repairs of the property, then they are probably going to pick this box for option 2. Seller agrees to pay a closing cost credit. But let's look at these 2 different options here. The first one is purchaser waives the right to request a closing cost credit from seller pursuant to paragraph 16 of the agreement, but seller's credit to the purchaser for the purchaser's closing costs, prepaids, discount points, and loan expenses, if any, as provided in paragraph 4 of the agreement, shall remain in full force and effect. So they're just trying to clarify that if you're in the contract under paragraph 4, the seller agreed to pay $5,000 towards purchaser's closing cost. That is separate from any request that would be made in this, okay? So by saying they waive their right to request, they're not taking away that $5,000 that was already agreed upon. Okay, everybody clear on that? So then the second piece of this is that they are asking for a credit. So seller agrees to pay a closing cost credit to purchaser at settlement in the amount of, let's say it was $2,000, pursuant to paragraph 16 of the agreement. The foregoing closing cost credit pursuant to paragraph 16 is in addition to the $5,000 that they had already agreed on. So now you're up to a $7,000 closing cost credit, if in the example I gave, in addition to any seller credit to purchaser for purchaser's closing costs, prepays, blah, 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 in paragraph 4. If purchaser is obtaining lender financing and the total closing cost credits pursuant to paragraph 4 and 16 exceed the maximum allowable amount for seller concessions and/or credits under the loan type selected by purchaser per such loan guidelines, then the total seller paid closing cost credits to purchaser shall be reduced to the maximum allowable amount for seller concessions and/or credits as permitted by such loan guidelines, and the purchase price of the property as set forth in paragraph 4 of the agreement shall be reduced by the amount of the closing cost credit not allowed per such loan guidelines unless otherwise agreed to in writing by the parties. So let's say the purchase price that in the example I gave was a $200,000 purchase price, and the total amount was $7,000 here, and the loan guidelines said that only 3%, you could only have a 3% closing cost credit. So that would be $6,000. So then it would be, what this is saying is you would be allowed a $6,000 closing cost credit, and you would reduce the price to $199. It actually needs to work out to be slightly different than that, just by a few pennies, because when you reduce the price to $199, now it's not quite $6,000 that's allowed. So anyway, but do you understand how that works?
Yeah, Rick, has that always been that way? Because I thought I had heard one time that if you ended up with more credits than you were allowed by the loan.
I think you just, at one point, I think you just lost them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that must have changed. That must have changed at some point.
So okay. This is something to make sure, this is one really to point out to your seller, but also I want to bring up here, this is something to talk to your lender about when you're, find out from the lender what's the max closing cost credit that under the program that your buyer can get from the seller or other people. It's not just the seller, because let's say they're getting a closing cost credit from the agent or whatever. It's a maximum amount of credits that they're allowed. So what is that amount? And then when after you do the home inspection, you need to talk about that and weigh that into what you're asking for. So
what's the date on the bottom of this form? I'm just curious.
10/19. So
okay, it probably was changed.
Yeah.
I guess that's why you got to keep coming to these classes, because stuff changes all the time. Thank you.
Yep. So let's see here. Any other questions on this one? Okie doke. Then we will move on
So just not to belabor that, but then you as an agent, if that happens, you need to make sure that the addendum is done to reduce that purchase price, or does that all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So you would need to make sure that happens.
Okay.
So the other thing I do want to point out is lenders can also not only talk about the closing cost credit, but lenders might say, you know, they don't want to allow the $2,000 credit for repairs, because a lot of lenders, they want the repairs done, not the buyer just getting credit for it, because they know that a lot of buyers aren't going to fix those things. And so anyway, you would need to also make sure that the lender is going to approve to allow that closing cost credit for repairs. I don't know if you've run into that at any point, but it depends on what the repair is for. But if it's a safety item or something like that, then that lender might say, oh no, we want it repaired.
And especially if it's an FHA or VA
Correct.
loan. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, let's see the next thing first. So 105. Daggone it, get out of the way. Need to come over here. So I'm going to get rid of this one while I'm thinking about it. Okay, so first right of refusal. So another way of putting it, it's contingent on sale and settlement of the buyer's home. So here we've paragraph 1, right of first refusal, the purchaser or the purchase agreement is hereby made contingent upon the sale and settlement of purchaser's property located at, so you put the house that the purchaser has to sell, the address goes in there. If purchaser's property is not currently listed, then you're going to put in how many days from ratification of this agreement are they going to get it listed. And so normally that's going to be anywhere from like 3 to 5 days or something like that. And it's got to be listed by a licensed real estate broker. So they don't get to put it on for sale by owner. According to this, seller reserves the right to continue to market the property and to receive offers to purchase the property until this contingency is removed. One thing I want to point out here to you all is you still have to change the status in the MLS. You're not allowed to leave it active. I can't remember for CVR MLS, what is the status when it's contingent on sale of a home? It's like, it's active pending, or I can't remember what it is, but there's a second type of status that you know that it's got a contract already on it, contingent on sale of a home.
I thought you still pended it, but
I think you do.
But indicated that there was a contingency or something.
Yeah. Because I hate to say I'm a member of 5 MLSs, and every MLS has a different status for this. So I can't remember what it is for CVR MLS, but you're not allowed to leave it active. That's per the real estate board regs and per the code of ethics, and also per the MLS policies and guidelines. So
yeah, I think there's a spot for contingency.
Yeah. So if during the pendency of this contingency, seller accepts another offer to purchase the property, i.e. a backup, then seller shall provide purchaser written notice of such acceptance, and purchaser shall within, and normally it's 72 hours, but again, it's negotiable. But 72 hours seems to be the norm from receipt of such written notice from the seller. Either the buyer would remove the contingency in accordance with paragraph 2 of this addendum, or they would terminate the purchase agreement by written notice to seller in accordance with paragraph 3 of this addendum. So seller gets a backup offer, seller sends notice that they have that backup offer, let's say 72 hours starts, then within that 72 hours, if the buyer wants to be able to, they don't think they're going to get their house sold and they need to walk, then they would terminate. If they can continue forward, they would remove that contingency, and we'll get into how that is removed. So paragraph 2, removal of right of first refusal. The removal of the contingency, or to remove the contingency, purchaser shall provide seller prior to the response deadline, so prior to that 72 hours ending, written notice of such removal, and attach to such notice the following documentation. So they've got different options. First one is written verification from purchaser's lender stating such lender has verified purchaser's income, assets, and credit report, and that purchaser is pre-approved for a loan to purchase the property without the requirement for purchaser to sell purchaser's property. Okay, so they can get a loan without selling their house. Or written verification from a third party in possession of purchaser's funds that purchaser has sufficient funds on deposit for a cash closing. So they've got the cash in the bank to close without selling. Or a fully executed real estate contract for the sale of purchaser's property, along with written verification from a third party that the buyer of purchaser's property has sufficient funds on deposit to purchase property, or from a lender stating that such lender has verified the purchaser's income, assets, and credit report, and such buyer has been pre-approved for a loan to purchase the purchaser's property, and neither the real estate contract nor the loan approval is conditioned upon the sale of any real property. So you don't have that continuous domino effect. So the purchaser of their property that they're selling has either the cash or a pre-approved loan. Okie doke. Here in the box, purchaser may also remove the contingency at any time prior to seller receiving another offer to purchase the property if purchaser provides to seller written notice of such removal and provides the documentation required in paragraph 2 of this addendum. So let's say they're 10 days into the contract, and the seller hasn't gotten another backup offer yet. The buyer can still remove this contingency by doing one of these 3 things and providing the documentation and everything. So if they can't do that, then number 3, termination. Time is of the essence in this addendum. If written notice of the removal, if the contingency is not received by seller prior to response deadline, it's terminated. B, purchaser does not list purchaser's property for sale by the time frame stated, or purchaser terminates the purchase agreement in accordance with paragraph 1 of this addendum, it's terminated. Or C, purchaser is unable to or unwilling to satisfy the requirements set forth in paragraph 2 of this addendum prior to the response deadline. So that 72 hours runs out and the buyer hasn't done anything, it's termination. Or D, the contingency is not satisfied by, and so there you would pick a number of, or a date. So if it got ratified on, July 1 and they wanted to allow 30 days, so you would put July 30th in here of 2021. So if they haven't removed that contingency by that time, they haven't gotten a contract or whatever, then the seller can terminate the agreement. Does that make sense? Number 4, subject to settlement of purchased property. So it's already got a contract on it, but they still have to settle. So if purchaser removes a contingency pursuant to paragraph 2C of this addendum, then the purchase agreement shall be made contingent upon settlement of purchaser property. So they've gotten a contract on their place. So now it's got to settle. Time periods. The time periods set forth in purchase agreement are hereby confirmed and or amended as follows. For property inspection, they can either purchaser shall perform purchaser's obligations pursuant to paragraph 16 of the purchase agreement, and you select one as specified in the purchase agreement, or within blank days after the date of purchase removes the contingency. So if your purchaser does not want to spend the money on a home inspection until they get a contract on their place, then they would check this box and put how many days. Does that make sense? Financing, the same thing. Do they want to make their financing contingency start from the ratification date or from when they get a contract on their place? Same with settlement. Okay. Other contingencies, if the purchase agreement is conditioned upon other contingencies that are not waived herein, purchaser agrees to diligently pursue their obligations under such contingencies within the time period set forth in such contingencies. And then notice, this says that if you send notice to one of the sellers, it is sent to all the sellers, and same for the purchasers. So you don't have to send it to all. I'd recommend it, but if you send to one, it's sent to all. So any questions on this one? If not, I will go ahead and Form 170. Oops. So this is the notice that the purchaser would use to tell them that they are removing their right of first refusal, you know, the contingency on sale of their home. So here you've got all the top part that you would fill in. And then option A, purchaser hereby removes the right of first refusal contingency contained in the addendum, and settlement shall occur pursuant to the terms of the addendum. So they pursuant to the right of first refusal addendum, purchaser attaches the following documentation to this notice. So you're going to select one box. So the written verification that they can get a loan without selling the house, or they're going to pick that they've got the cash on the hand, or that they've got a fully executed contract. So you would pick whichever one they're choosing and then send the documentation backing that choice up. Or B, purchaser hereby terminates the purchase agreement, and the entire deposit goes back to them. So any questions on that? We'll say that this form they made very self-explanatory. So let's move on here. Let me ask you this. Are you all seeing the COVID addendum used at all? I'm not seeing it up here very much. It's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had agents using it in the height of COVID last year, Rick, but I'm not seeing it as much anymore. Yeah,
let's hope that there's not a height of COVID again. If it is, then we can cover it. But I just thought I would probably move on. One thing that I am seeing in, so I'll go ahead and get it here. It is 3:30. That's not the time. That's the, so possession by seller agreement. So where the sellers, you know, they want to be able to stay in the house for 30 days after settlement, you know, until they can find something else. So in the seller's market, they seem to be able to get that. So let's go ahead and cover that one. So again, fill in the top part there. And please fill in everything. One thing, sorry to bring this up, but I'm noticing as a whole, and I brought this up at a team meeting at at Leesburg office yesterday, and there was the title company was there also, and the gal from the title company said, please, we are seeing exactly what he's talking about. So agents are kind of getting lazy as a whole and not filling in all the blanks. One big thing we're seeing a lot, and it's not in here, but they're not filling in who's holding the EMD. And, you know, they're just leaving things blank. And yeah, it might save you a touch of time when you're, you know, writing the offer, but it's going to waste time because that title company is going to be, well, one, our compliance should be asking for you to fill it in. The title company is going to be asked for that to be filled in because they need to know all these things. So anyway, it's just something that I'm seeing. So if you are the listing agent and the buyer agent sends a sloppy contract in, unfortunately, in the best interest of your client, the seller, is get all those things filled in and agree on them up front instead of having to go back and, you know, fight things out later on, you know, so who is holding the EMD or whatever, and having to put that in there. So sorry to get sidetracked, but so let's go ahead, recitals here. So all this is talking about the purchase agreement. So here's the agreement. Now, therefore, in consideration of the premises and of the mutual promises of the parties, seller and purchaser agree as follows. Purchaser grants permission to seller to retain possession of the property after settlement, but seller must vacate the property and return all keys to purchaser no later than, and so you would pick, you know, again, if they're staying there 30 days, so whatever the date of 30 days after settlement would be. Seller shall notify purchaser at least 24 hours in advance of vacating the property. For such use and occupancy of the property after settlement, seller agrees to pay purchaser at settlement the following occupancy fee. Again, in this crazy seller's market we were having, that was one of the things that was being thrown in. You get to stay there for free. But if that's not the case, or if that were the case, you would probably pick here a flat fee of 0 for the entire occupancy. If they are paying, then they're actually going to pay the actual cost of the, oh, sorry. Thanks, Patrice.
Got it.
So you would be paying the purchaser's actual cost of mortgage, principal and interest, real estate taxes, and insurance. So the PITI. And if there's a property owners association or condo or whatever, you'd be paying, including that also. Or the sum of, you know, whatever agreed upon price per day, or a flat fee. So pick one of those. If seller vacates the property prior to the occupancy deadline, the occupancy fee, and you get to select one, will or will not be prorated. If seller fails to vacate the property by the occupancy deadline, seller shall pay to purchaser a daily occupancy fee of blank. I would recommend that it be higher than the amount up here. So per day until seller vacates the property. Seller shall also be responsible for any reasonable expenses incurred by purchaser as a result of seller's failure to vacate, including but not limited to temporary accommodations, furniture storage, additional moving costs, attorney's fees, and other costs of enforcing this agreement. So not only are you saying that the seller's going to pay more per day than they were before, but they also would have to pay for all these other things. Okay. Prior to settlement for property, purchaser at purchaser expense shall obtain fire and extended coverage insurance on the property, which purchaser deems adequate to ensure damage to the property from any of the covered risk. All risk of loss or damage to the property by fire, windstorm, casualty, or other covered loss is assumed by purchaser at settlement, regardless of possession. During the period of occupancy of property by seller at settlement, seller shall, so they're going to maintain the property in the same condition. So if something breaks, it's up to the seller to fix it. This question was just asked of me yesterday by an agent. And I said, well, read the contract, but it's very specific there that the seller goes ahead and has to fix that. Maintain the landscaping, any mowing, pay utility charges, and not make any alterations to the property without advance written consent by the purchaser. Seller shall deliver the property, including all appliances, heating, cooling, blah, 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 in substantially the same physical condition as on the settlement date, less wear and tear, and broom clean with all trash and debris removed. Seller shall be liable to purchaser for the expense of repairing any damage to the property caused by seller or seller's contractors. At settlement, seller shall deposit It's basically a security deposit like any other rental, to be held in escrow and applied as set forth herein. Purchaser shall conduct a post-occupancy inspection of the property and deliver to seller and the escrow agent within 3 days after occupancy deadline a list of deficiencies in breach of paragraph 6 and any other provisions of this agreement. If the escrow agent does not receive a list of deficiencies within the specified time, escrow agent shall, not may, they shall pay the deposit to the seller within 3 days. If a list of deficiencies is provided by the specified time, purchaser may, without prejudicing other legal rights and remedies, direct the escrow agent to pay purchaser such portion of the deposit necessary to pay purchaser's actual cost incurred because of seller's non-compliance with this agreement. The escrow agent shall disperse the balance of the deposit, if any, to the seller. During the period of occupancy of the property by seller after settlement, purchaser shall have the right to access the property at reasonable times for the purpose of inspection, and such right shall extend to purchasers, agents, and employees. Just had a question on this one last week, I guess. So we had a seller that was in a post-occupancy, and the buyer wanted to be able to come in and bring their contractors in to get ready for doing work. And the seller was saying no. Now, the problem with this one was, because in here it says that they have to allow access at reasonable times, so on and so forth. So you would need to get an attorney to go after and possibly go to court to say, what is a reasonable amount of time? Well, they were within 5 days of the seller supposed to be moving out. So nothing was going to happen. So I would recommend that you as a buyer's agent, if your buyer is going to want to be able to get into the property or get people into the property while the seller is in there, address that up front before you're going to allow the seller to keep possession. Say that the seller will give access to contractors and so on and so forth. And if they do not, then there is a penalty to that seller for not doing so. Because if you don't get it established up front, you're going to get a seller like we just had last week that's going to say pound sand, I'm not letting anybody in. I don't care what the contract says, because I know that you're not going to be able to get me to court by the time that my time runs out. Does that make sense?
Well, Rick, could this tie in some way then to, I don't remember exactly what that COVID form says, but I can see if somebody's in there and due to COVID, they might not want anybody coming in until they get out. So,
right. And so, yeah, if that's the case, then, work it out up front. Don't, but unfortunately these days, buyers expect sellers to do a lot of things and sellers expect buyers to do a lot of things, and it doesn't always work out. So if, again, if that buyer is going to be doing work and they want to get people in, address that right up front. So
hey,
this
Rick,
one here,
question, just if you have their deposit, can't that be a jeopardy if they're going to refuse to let the person in?
No, because that property or that deposit says that it's damage to the property.
Okay, I guess can you tie that in if you put that in there in 8 and say that the penalty? Well,
yeah, you could. So possibly you could say, if they are not allowed access, then the seller gets to keep the buyer gets to keep the earnest money deposit in paragraph 7, or $500 of it, or whatever the amount.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So that could be done. Any personal property not included in the sale and kept on the property by sellers at seller's risk. That's saying that seller has to should get their own insurance and everything like that. seller agrees to indemnify and hold harmless from any loss, so on and so forth, the purchaser. So they understand that the seller is living there at the seller's risk. The parties acknowledge that this agreement is not subject to landlord-tenant law. This is huge. So so the seller can evict them. I mean, the buyer can evict that seller. They don't get to stay there forever and not pay rent. This agreement does not amend or supersede any of the respective rights and obligations of the parties under the agreement, being the contract, other than such rights and obligations specifically described in this agreement. And notice this possession agreement may impact the terms and conditions of purchaser's mortgage and or homeowner's insurance policy. Additionally, it may be prudent for seller to obtain renter's insurance. Each party is advised to consult with their respective mortgage, homeowner's insurance. So yeah, if the buyer is buying it for their principal residence, then they can't allow possession for more than 60 days because the loan that they're getting says that they need to be in the house within 60 days. Also, their insurance is going to be different. They understand that insurance companies understand that there's higher risk when tenants are in a house than when the owners are in the house. So you would need to get, that buyer would need to get insurance for the time frame that seller is staying in there, basically as if it were a rental. Yeah, and if they don't, if they just got regular homeowners insurance, I would say there's a very good chance if something happens, that insurance company is going to say, we are not covering you because you had a tenant in there, and the insurance that you had with us, you were saying it was your principal residence and you were living there. Make sense?
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a licensed insurance agent as well. I've been in insurance for 15 years, but that's what I was going to ask too. Then you read that, and that kind of went back to my question. But I guess because technically the insurance company is going to want them to have what some companies call a dwelling fire policy. That's what it's technically called. It's a landlord policy by some rights, but I guess the person would have to have a landlord policy. The tenant would have to have a renter's policy.
Correct.
And then that policy would end up having to be changed over to a regular homeowner's policy when the buyer takes
occupancy. Correct. Yep. So that's something you would need to be dealing with your insurance agent right up front and let them know what's going on here. Look, they are going to be there for 30 days, so we need a 30-day policy, and so on and so forth.
So Rick, I have a question. They're responsible for the utility costs. So does it make sense to just keep the utilities in their name until after they vacate? Or I had a client to ask that question.
Yes, and actually, thank you for bringing that point up also, because again, down in Richmond, there was an agent having a little battle with their, or there's a battle because the seller says, they're turning off the power or all utilities. They're taking them out of their name the day before settlement. And remember, the contract reads that the utilities will be on through the date of settlement so that they can do the pre-settlement inspection. And so you need to point all these things out to your seller, hey, seller, pay the extra $10 or whatever for that one more day so that the utilities are on through the date of settlement so that, because if that buyer things don't work out and the utility actually gets turned off and they go to do their inspection on that date of settlement, that is the seller's problem, not the buyer's.
And how about through the period of possession, if that seller is still staying there for an extra 30 days?
Yeah, so then again, it's that seller would not take it out of their hands, if you would. They would continue to pay for it through their, let's say it was a 30-day that they were there, they've got to pay, keep it under their name for those 30 days.
Yep, okay, yep.
Anything else on this one?
Rick, is not necessarily tied into this, but the thing about the insurance can be really tricky. And I know of a situation where a person was, you know, it was their personal residence, and then they leased the property, but may not have changed their insurance, and the tenant caused damage like a fire in the property.
Right.
And that property, it's crazy, but I think it's been several years and they're still fighting who's really responsible. It was a townhouse, was their personal residence. They had, you know, their personal life insurance, residence insurance. But then when they leased it, I don't know if they changed it over to rental property. And there was a fire, and it was a mess from what I understand. So the insurance piece is just really critical if you do something out of the ordinary.
And it's really good that CVR has put this in here to kind of point it out to people, but you need to make sure to point it out to your clients also. And just, if I can, so, and this is it's unfortunately kind of a pain, but if you're talking to them on the phone about different things, and this insurance being one, and you say, look, you know, I want to point out to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, while you're living there post-occupancy, you'll need to have some renter's insurance. And so that's your client that you're dealing with. I would follow that phone call up with an email or a text. I just wanted to confirm our conversation that you understand that you need to get renter's insurance while you're staying there post-occupancy. Because again, the American way now is to say, you never told me, even if you know they did, it's not my fault, I've got to blame somebody else. So without it being in writing, you can't prove anything. So I know it takes a little extra time, but that little extra time is worth it.
They can provide a certificate of insurance.
What's that?
Make them provide a certificate of insurance. Most
places
and all that, they're going to require they get a copy.
Right. And you know, you can ask that, but you know, they might not turn that in, but at least have it in writing that you told them that they needed to get it. I would say in this, I'm surprised that it doesn't say, like the lease does, that they have to provide a copy of that certificate of insurance. But anyway, this document does not ask for it. So if you wanted one, you would need to include that down here in 12 under other. So
I think the bottom line is there's so many things that can go crazy with not changing possession at the time that it really needs to be thoroughly vetted.
Yep. But we are seeing it, you know, more right now in the market than normal. So not seeing much of possession by purchaser. Do you want to go over that agreement though, or?
Yeah.
Was that a yes?
I would say yes. I would
say
yes.
Patrice is going to get her exercise today. Sorry. So that is form 325.
All right, let me go pull that. I'll be in the room.
Wait a second. Do you want it? So let me ask this. How about purchasers limited access to property agreement? That's the last one I was looking at covering. So that's 331.
Okay.
So save yourself one trip.
331.
Yep.
Okay.
It is surprising that the possession by purchaser agreement is actually more different than the possession by sellers than I thought it would be. So we'll come on down here to the agreement, and I'm going to just skip to paragraph 1. This is pretty much the same. So the seller grants permission to purchaser to enter and take possession of the property on. It's just ahead of settlement. So let's go on to number 2. So that really doesn't have a whole lot else other than when they get to take possession. Number 2, for use and occupancy of the property prior to settlement, purchaser agrees to pay seller an occupancy fee of, and you sold per day, week, month from the possession date until settlement date of the property, or until delivery of possession by purchaser as provided in paragraph 7 of this agreement. This right of occupancy is exclusively for, you're going to put the number of occupants. So, you know, if it's 2 people, put in 2 people and the following pets. So the occupancy fee shall be paid to seller in full prior to possession date or at settlement or in installments of the first day of selected period. I would recommend getting the money up front if I was representing the seller. For purposes of calculation of occupancy fees, a partial day, basically what this says is a partial day is a full day. They pay for that whole day, but settlement date is not a day, okay? So you don't charge them for settlement day, but you do charge them for a partial day, like the day they're moving in. For occupancy fee payments made weekly or monthly, any partial week or month of occupancy will be prorated to a daily fee. And purchaser shall pay such prorated daily occupancy to seller. Or if paid in advance, seller shall refund to purchaser the unused prorated daily occupancy fee at settlement. Number 3, purchaser shall conduct the pre-settlement walkthrough of the property as provided in the purchase agreement before the possession date. Any exceptions to the condition of the property shall be in writing and delivered to seller by purchaser prior to possession date, and governed by the terms of the purchase agreement. In the event of a dispute between the parties regarding any exceptions, purchaser may also delay the possession date until the dispute is resolved and receive a prorated credit of any occupancy fee for the period of non-possession by the purchaser. So you're going to do an inspection before they move in. If there are issues, then you need to get those issues taken care of before moving in. And if that takes an extra few days, then those dates are prorated, is the basics of that. Number 4, during the period of possession of the property by purchaser prior to settlement, purchaser shall maintain the property, including heating, cooling, electrical, blah, 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 blah. So they're in charge of all the condition of the property. They maintain the landscaping and everything like that and pay the utilities and not make any alterations to property without the prior written consent of seller. This one here is huge. Back a few years ago, there was a buyer that moved into the property prior to settlement. They had a pre-settlement agreement, but they decided to go ahead and tear out some bathrooms, tear out the kitchen and everything like that. They didn't get permission to do it. And then their financing fell apart and they couldn't settle on it. And they had ripped everything out of the house. So that one ended up going to court. That was a mess. The good news is we were on the side of the seller. The bad part is the buyer's agent had, and it was in writing, the buyer's agent told the buyers, oh yes, you can go ahead and do all that. So that buyer agent, I didn't hear the outcome, but I'm sure they ended up probably paying for all that stuff to be repaired. So number 5, upon execution of this agreement, purchaser shall deposit. So here again, it's a earnest money deposit. This part here is basically the same as what we went over in the one for the seller keeping occupancy, okay? Number 6, during the period of occupancy of the property, by purchaser prior to settlement, seller shall have the right to access the property at a reasonable times and so on and so forth. So the same thing, if there's certain things you want to have done, work them out up front. So number 7, if for any reason settlement is not made as provided in the purchase agreement, or if purchaser violates the terms of this agreement, purchaser shall vacate and deliver possession of the property and return all keys to seller within, and it's probably 5 to 10 days after written demand by seller to purchaser. Purchaser waives any further notice on or before the occupancy expiration date. Purchaser shall deliver to seller the property, including all appliances, heating, cooling, blah, 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 in the same physical condition as on possession date and broom clean with all trash and debris removed. Purchaser shall be liable to seller for any cleaning and the expense of repairing any damage to the property caused by purchaser. Number 8, if purchaser fails to vacate the property, this is pretty much the same as I said for the seller. Make it a higher fee, and also they need to understand that they can be responsible for the expenses for other accommodations, for mortgage interest, furniture storage, all that different stuff, and attorney's fees for enforcing this agreement. So it's not just that daily rate. They can be charged other fees also. Purchaser agrees to indemnify and hold seller harmless from and against any loss and liability. This part down here is basically the same as in the other one we went over. Number 11 gives notice about insurance and everything. So the same deal here would be just in the reverse. So the seller is going to need to, if they let them move in 30 days before settlement, they need to change their insurance to be basically landlord insurance. And that buyer is going to need to get renter's insurance. Okie doke. Questions on that one? So the last one we are going to cover is purchaser's limited access. So 331. Okay. Seller grants to purchaser and purchaser's representatives access to the property on, so you insert a date under the terms. It's just a date, okay? It's not from that date till settlement. It is 1 day, or if it's going to be more than 1 day, then you put the dates, specific dates, okay? Under the terms set forth herein, and for the following limited purposes. Check all boxes that apply. So the first box is to deliver and store the following furniture, appliances, and/or personal property in the rooms, areas of the property so indicated. So you would do that here, write in what you're delivering. To measure rooms or window openings and/or show the property to purchasers, contractors, decorators, so on and so forth. Does state here, no work is to be performed to the property by purchaser or any of the purchaser's representatives except as follows. Let me just bring one thing up. It happened up in our Leesburg office. It was a new home that was being bought by a husband and wife, and they were within a couple weeks of settlement, or actually I think they were within a week of settlement, and the seller, the builder, was not providing a washer and dryer, but gave permission for them to go ahead and install the washer and dryer prior to settlement. So builder was being nice. Unfortunately, the buyer, the husband, was in a tragic accident and got killed before settlement. And so the wife on her own was unable to buy the property. So they got out on financing, and the builder said, you can come in and get your washer and dryer. The agent went with them when they were getting the washer and dryer. No damage was done. However, the builder then turned the water on to the property, and they discovered, look at Patrice's face, she knows what's coming. They had turned on the water valves when they installed the washer and dryer, and so it flooded. The good news is it was a single family home, and the laundry room was on a slab, so it really only damaged that room. But it could have been one of those, like so many houses these days, where it's on the second floor, and then you would have had one heck of a mess. So just beware when you're doing things like that, check everything. So anyway, the good news is the builder said they were able to get it dried out, and there was really no damage to speak of. So nothing more came of it. But the agent had a, oh my goodness moment, you know, and it was a couple of days before they were relieved of that stress. So, or you can pick other, I don't know what another reason would be, but you would check that box and describe whatever that is. Number 2, this agreement does not give purchaser the right to occupy or take possession of the property, but only the right to access the property for the limited purposes set forth above. Further entry to the property is not permitted without the written consent of the seller, which consent shall be at seller's sole discretion. Number 3, purchaser hereby deposits a sum of blank to the escrow agent identified in the purchase agreement or seller or other, which deposit shall be credited purchaser at settlement or paid as set forth herein if settlement does not occur. I will say, I would hope for just, you might have some sort of deposit if you're keeping stuff there, moving stuff in or whatever, but just for contractors to come and measure and everything, I hope they're not charging a deposit for that. But anyway, you can. Number 4, all personal property is stored in the property at the sole risk of purchaser. Seller is not responsible for any loss or damage to purchaser's personal property except for seller's gross negligence. Personal property insurance for purchaser's personal property is the sole responsibility of the purchaser. Seller is not the bailee of the purchaser or any of the purchaser's representatives. Purchaser agrees to release, indemnify, and hold seller harmless from any claim, loss, fees, blah, 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 blah. I do have a question for the gentleman there that you're in insurance. Can you get insurance for personal property that you are keeping in someone else's house?
That's a little tricky. I don't know if it fall under an inland marine policy. They call it like you would have a storage facility. Okay. That would be some, I'd have to do some research on that one too.
Yeah. So interesting. Purchaser warrants that they are responsible for any damage to the property caused by purchaser or purchaser's representatives and shall indemnify and hold seller harmless from any and all such damage. If settlement does not occur and damage to the property has occurred, seller agrees the amount of money required to restore the property to its original condition will be deducted from the deposit set forth in the purchase agreement and the deposit in paragraph 3. Any balance due to seller for damages is the responsibility of purchaser. And the final one here, if settlement does not occur by the settlement date set forth in the purchase agreement or is extended, purchaser shall remove all personal property stored at the property within 10 days of seller's written notice to purchaser to remove such personal property, and the remaining balance after payment for damages pursuant to paragraph 5 above of the deposit under the purchase agreement and set forth in paragraph 3 above shall be paid to seller. Any of the purchaser's personal property remaining in the property after the 10-day period shall be deemed abandoned by purchaser. Seller may dispose of said personal property in seller's sole discretion, and purchaser shall hold seller harmless for any said disposition. Don't trust that last part there. This language is, before you do get rid of that property, you need to, unfortunately, you might need to contact an attorney because there are different laws about abandoned property. We had this come up again in our Leesburg office where the seller did not have everything out, after settlement. They wrote up an agreement and it said basically this language in here, that if it's not removed by this date, then it's abandoned and the purchaser has the right to dispose of it. And so the seller just never did anything. So they went past that date. The buyer went ahead and hired people to come and basically trash out the house and get rid of the stuff. And they were sued, and the buyer was sued and lost because they threw the personal property of that seller away, even though that seller had agreed to language just like this. So before you go and get rid of it, get an attorney to help out. And it's probably going to have to go through almost like an eviction process and set outside. You give that seller the option to be able to come in and pick it up. I think it's terrible, but I'm just letting you know what happened. So.
Hey, Rick, on that question you asked me about the insurance, there is a provision in you. If the buyer has like a homeowner's policy of their own, they're moving from one home to another home, and they move their personal contents over, or just some of it, say,
right.
It'll usually give you up to 10% of the personal property value. So let's say you're in a $300,000 property.
Right.
Or contents may be, say, 150,000. So it'll cover you up to 15,000 of property that you would have moved to that other person's residence. And that's how it typically works with temporary storage. So it's 10% of your personal property coverage in your policy that will cover for. And then other than that, then you need to get an inland marine policy to cover the difference over and above that. So that's something I would ask your insurance company before you start moving your stuff. Can't hear you.
Rick, we lost your sound.
Nope, still can't. No.
Did you go back to that old computer?
He said, no, he didn't. You're on mute, Patrice, if you're trying to say something.
I was. I said we might have to end a little early if we can't figure it out soon.
Yeah.
Now he's muted.
Yeah, I think he's just playing with all his audio, trying to see if he can kick it back in.
Yeah, he's gonna go out and come back in.
Yeah. How's everybody doing? Is this helpful? Did you learn something today so far?
Oh yeah. You can always pick up something on these contracts for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it seems just like when you think you got it all figured out, something changes.
Oh yeah. And then ask questions and it sort of clarifies things that are a little gray.
Right. Well, good. Well, I'm grateful that you all took the time to be on here to learn from Rick and hear this and learn from one another.
For everybody, my name is Chip Massey. If you ever have any insurance questions, give me a shout or text, call me, whatever. So I'll find out, research, and get back if I don't know the answer to it.
Great.
That's good. Good to know. Thanks.
What's your number, Chip? Just in case.
804-241-6042.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Woo.
Have no idea.
I thought I was going to have to start telling jokes and do some like song and dance. Okay.
Well, actually, anybody have any questions? Or I can't remember what I was trying to say. What were we talking about when I lost audio?
I was sharing about the insurance.
I was asking, would rental insurance, like tenants and renters insurance, would it work the same way, that 10%? So if they were moving from a rental and needed to put stuff in the house, do you think that would work the same way or not?
Probably so, but using a renter's policy, the 10% so minute, depending on what their coverages would be.
Yeah, exactly.
I would call the company to ask them. That very well may cover that. Most renters policies are only going to have 30, 50,000 to cover.
Right. Yeah. So
I think that it probably has the same provisions in it, where it's 10% of that amount.
Right. Yeah. So, well, that's good information to know. Anybody have any questions?
So again, you said that if the seller leaves things behind before that buyer goes and throws things away, they may want to just sort of hold on to them or set them out for a certain length of time.
Yep. Before they get rid of them, definitely let the seller know, hey, they are sitting outside. You're welcome to come and get them. But there are laws about abandoned property that still come into effect. So, anyway, which, again, I think it's terrible. The thing I don't know is how long you have to let it sit there and everything like that. That's right.
Okay.
That's unfortunately what attorneys are for, I guess, to suck more money up like that. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else? Well, it does look like we're going to end a little bit early. Next time I was wondering, I was thinking, and it would be a shorter class, it might take maybe an hour or so, I don't even know, to go over all the different disclosures, including the ones that we require, the ones that, federal disclosures, state disclosures, things like that. And even some of the agency disclosures. Would that be something people would be interested in or not?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Okay, doke. Well, then we will plan on that.
All right. We'll look at the dates, Rick, and then everybody will get it on the calendar and let you know. Okay,
sounds good. Oh, just to so I'll be sending something out. I will be out of town next week, Monday through Thursday, I think it is. It's going to be hard for me to take phone calls. My wife and I are going on a bike trip. And so we're biking like 50 to 60 miles a day. So we'll be on our bikes and I probably won't be answering phone calls and things. So
you're slacking off. You're only doing 50 to 60 miles.
Yep. We're taking it ezy. So
yeah, there you go.
The one thing about it though, I did see the topo of it. And so there's quite a few pretty good climbs. So,
well, have fun with that. Where are you going?
Up to Finger Lakes, New York.
Oh, okay.
So it's a wine tour. So we'll bike, and then at the end of the day, we'll
be drinking,
tasting some different wines. So
well, have fun. And everybody, if you need something in his absence, anything regarding contracts, procedures, things like that, Michael Hopman is the associate broker. And if you need me, as always, I'm here.
Yep. Well, thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Cool.
Enjoy your trip. Be safe.
Have a great trip.
Bye. Thanks.
I'll remember now. Thank you. Bye. You too. Hey, and open houses tomorrow. Teaching open houses tomorrow. Okay. I'll see you then. Are you doing the field trip Friday?
I think so.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Then I'll put you down, and because I'm trying to track how many people, because I might need another driver.
Tomorrow is open house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Recording. And